I was 19 when I met him. We went out for 5 years before we got married, you know. So, and the home I came from had a role to play with the way, you know, I became, you know. So I grew up in a home where, you know, you see your parents fight, you know. So, and I never knew that, you know, like my mom, maybe you say, was hot-tempered or anything. It's after I wrote the book and I was telling her what I wrote, because they saw it on Facebook.
How did your parents
they saw it on Facebook, and they're like, what did she do? You know, that kind of stuff. So my mom now, you know, calls me on the phone. Even my dad called me. My mom calls me on the phone, and I started telling her that, you know, what's the content of the book. And she said, well, it's really true. If it is going to help another family, actually, when, you know, those days I used to be very hot-tempered, you know, and I never knew my mom was hot-tempered. You know, as children, we just saw them fight.
I just thought that was just how, you know, it was. Yeah, that's how it was supposed to be.
So I grew up, you know, with that, you know, that's how things are, you know, are done. That it's only when you start fighting physically that's when things you know, and that's when things have gone too far. But you can shout, you can get angry, you can, you know, raise your voice. So it was a normal thing for me. So my surprise was when I got married and it all became an issue, and I'm like, I've been like this all these years. Everybody loves me the way I am, so why is it now a problem? You know, so that was me, you know, that was what formed the book. So this first week we got married, then he was working with United Nations, and he went to Abuja. He said, let's go to Abuja together. So I went with him, and for some reason, you know, he left. He went to work. I really don't even know what my problem was that day. You know, maybe because he left me in the hotel and didn't probably maybe plan on how I'm going to eat, or I really don't remember what it was that was upsetting me. But I know it was just because he left me and he didn't call. He didn't check up throughout the whole day. So, you know, as an angry person that I was already boiling, and I was just waiting for him to come back. So when he came back, the look on my face alone would have told him that there's already a problem. And I started nagging. I started to complain. There was nothing he could tell me that could, you know, pacify me. I just kept complaining and complaining, and at some point he just went and sat at the corner, you know, like in a hotel where the bed is and the phone. He just went there, sat and started crying. And it was when he started crying that I just discovered, okay, maybe I've taken it too far. I'm like, oh, I said, oh, I'm sorry.
This was the first week.
This was just our first week in marriage, you know. And things like, you know, like this one, he told me, you know, that I did it. I can't remember I did it. He said it could be one of those days. Still the first, you know, that first week, you know, first week of our marriage, and I was so upset, you know, and I broke the plates in the kitchen. You know, I got so angry, I just entered the kitchen and, you know, and shattered plates. Sincerely, I can't believe I could do that kind of thing, but I did it actually, you know. Or, you know, things like that. You know, I usually would get angry. I would bang the door at him, so he'll be talking to me, and
you said you would walk out.
I walk out. I'm like, I can't take this anymore. You know, it's getting. So I'll just ignore him, walk out, and I'll make sure I bang the door. So these are the kind of things I did, and I don't think there's no man that would want to feel that way, because it also communicates disrespect.
Yes, which was a chapter you wrote in the book as well.
Yes, so I talked about disrespect, things I did, you know, to show that, you know, I would okay, we're talking about anger now, we have moved to disrespect, you know, so maybe I'll use, there's this thing that they say, I don't know how to explain it, but I try to explain in the book, you know, when you use your nose and you push it up, you know, someone's talking to you.
It's called yimu.
Okay, so you just use your nose to, you know, do like this, you know. So he's talking and I'm like doing all of that
in front of him.
Oh, right, in front of him. So he sees it. yes. So, you know, he sees it and he complains, and I'm like, oh, I will give an excuse for why I did whatever, you know, did that. And disrespecting him, I didn't just do it, you know, in secret. I disrespected him in public. You know, I could talk to him anyhow in front of people. And my husband had always been a pastor. Not like I knew him as a pastor. So you can imagine, you know, that kind of, it was even people, you know, that I knew, maybe like older women that would tell me, no, you know, you don't talk like this in front of people, you know, and all of that. And yet, you know, at times I couldn't even understand what they're saying, and I'll be making excuses for why I'm doing what I'm doing, you know. So this really ate deeply into our marriage, and it really affected. What I tell people is that bitterness is the elder brother of anger. So if you're an angry person, if you don't deal with your anger and you allow it linger, it turns to bitterness. That's just what bitterness is. Anger that has not been dealt with. So I was that person, but I didn't know that I was that kind of person until I got married. So, you know, it's like when people offend me or make me upset, and I don't maybe like tell them, and I just I cook it in my heart, and it's there. So it just keeps growing, you know, without me knowing. Then I'm just bitter, you know, about, you know, I just become bitter. And it was my husband that started telling me that, see, you're a bitter person, you know, you're busy, you know? And I'm like, no, how can I, you know,
because in all of this you were born again.
I was born again.
Born again,
spirit-filled, talking
Christian.
Oh, I was, even in university days, I was in intercessory squad, so we used to go to the village outreaches, go and do evangelism, do dry fast and prayer all night.
Still had this,
so I had all this, you know, with me, you know.
When did your eyes begin to open?
When my eyes began to open.
Wait, how long, before I said, how long did you then do this for in marriage? For like how many years or months or weeks?
You know, this actually, like this book You know, I've been married for over 10 years. So my change just started not too long ago.
Wow.
Yes, it just started, let's say, in the seventh year. That's really, so you can imagine how long, you know, because I see people that will even tell me, oh, I've tried 3 years, 4 years, it's not working, I don't think it could work. At times, you know, it takes even longer, because the only time change can come is even when the person realizes that the person has a problem.
Exactly.
So it depends on how long it will take you to realize you know that you have a problem.
Yeah.
So for me, when it happened was when I just figured out and saw how I was ruining, because actually it's ruin. The word ruin, yes, it's catchy, but that was what was happening. You know, when I discovered what my actions, you know, or inactions was doing to my marriage.
Yeah.
So I just figured out, you know, like the Bible say, a wise woman builds her home, a foolish woman tears it down. You know, and I actually said in my book that, you know, the foolish woman, you don't need anybody to help you. You can do it all by yourself. You can actually tear down your home by yourself. Because the things I did, I didn't have the influence of, you say, like a friend or a type. This is just who I am, you know, and that was who I was. Yes, who I was, you know, and its impact. So I just discovered that, you know, at some point my husband stopped talking.
He said so. He became distant.
He became distant.
You laugh with other people more.
He won't laugh with me. You know, you're thinking, okay, your husband should laugh with you. The person's not even looking at you. You can come into a place, he wouldn't even notice that you are there. You know, unlike before, maybe when you enter a place, you know, when you know how the person treated you before. So the person treats you like a queen. As soon as you come, you know, he wants to announce that my wife is here. He wants to take you everywhere. You know, he's just excited. Then, you know, there's this light in the eye, you see. Then all of a sudden, there's no light.
You know that trouble has come.
Trouble, you know. So the person doesn't just, you know, just know that someone doesn't really care, you know. And, you know, because he wasn't talking about it, so as in talking in the sense, he wasn't telling anybody. So it's not as if he will report me to anybody. But it's just something, you know, that in the house, you just know that there's that distance. So there's really nothing to talk about. So you're just together, but you're not saying anything. That was the problem, because he will say, even to correct me, you know, if he says something, then it will become an issue. I will blow it out of proportion. So, you know, and that's the, you know, when I talk about assumption, someone is trying to correct you.
I love that chapter.
You know, someone is trying to tell you something, oh, see, this thing is not right. And I will start reading another meaning to what is being said. So, you know, and you just wonder, okay, someone study that you have, you get angry easily. You have to work on your anger. Then I would interpret it as him saying,
there's something wrong with you.
There's something wrong with me. Or he does not like me. Or he just wants to pick, you know, a fight. You know, just with me, you know. So such things, you know, just became, it was just an issue. It just became so much. And I think because of that, he just said, you know what, let him just give me some space. And also, if he talks with me, you know, it will turn into an argument. So we'll start arguing, and I will definitely get him upset.
Definitely.
So you know that's let us not talk, so that I don't get upset.
So that you don't get upset.
Let her not read meanings into what I'm saying. Let her not, you know. So that was part of why he would just ignore me. So he would rather just see me and just, you know, ignore me. But it was bad. It was bad. And yes. And you know, that's when my husband always tell me, because when I'll say sorry, and it's as if it's taking him time to come around, and I'm complaining, I'm like, but we're believers, I've said sorry.
You know, you're knowing you're believers. You didn't know you're believers when you were acting.
So I'm like, hey, we're believers, you know, and he'll be like, I'm not a light bulb that you switch on and switch off. You know, you don't just, you know, do things at will, and you just expect me to just be okay. Then the next minute, as I'm trying to, because as if when he's trying to recover from the one I have done,
I was back to back.
You know, it's back to back. I'm doing another one. You know, so you're still trying to come out of one, you do another one. When do you give the person the opportunity to breathe? Well, my change actually started from the place of understanding. You know, where the Bible says wisdom is the principal thing. Get wisdom. You know, you're getting understanding. So for me, understanding was where my own change came from, because I just discovered that really all these things that I was told that all these things I was doing was actually wrong. And also I came to that point where I saw a bigger picture of where God was taking me to, more or less like my purpose in life, what my life assignment is. And in order to fulfill whatever it is, whether it's in marriage, you know, having a peaceful home, there are things that you can't do, you know, as in there are character flaws that you shouldn't, you know, or emotional baggage. That's the word. Emotional baggage. The emotional
that you shouldn't carry
into the marriage. So those are the things that I had to, you know, start to let go. So for me, one of the ways that, you know, it was the praying. I prayed about it, like you read. I kept praying and asking God to help me, because the thing is, especially, I don't know, if you're not an angry person, you wouldn't understand what, you know, anger can do. You know, because even when the person resolves in the heart that the person doesn't want to do it, when you go out, it's as if that's the day.
You said it, that there's some days that before 12 noon,
you're already, you know, all your resolve is just going to trash, because you just see yourself exhibiting those things that you actually prayed and told God that, I'm not going to do it today. So practical things were just like, you know, and my husband was very, in fact, helpful. I think if people have spouses, whether husbands or wives, like my husband, I think marriages will actually fulfill the heaven on earth, you know, as if you want a heaven on earth kind of marriage, because you know, I stretched him, but he was still there for me, you know. So, like I said before, I said he never went out to report me. He didn't go out to talk.
Said so.
Because my dad didn't know all this. So my dad was even wondering.
That was until you wrote the book that
like, oh, so was something going on? So he never, you know, badmouthed me or talked about me, but he would tell me, he would always call me and tell me ways to handle anger. He would say, see, if you are angry, don't speak. You know, learn how not to speak in anger. Just, you know, so I said very practical things. Maybe even if someone is saying something and I can't understand, I'm listening to understand, not to give a response.
Give your own response. Just finish your answer.
And my facial expression, because if I'm angry, my face will tell. So I also start monitoring my, you know when you're talking and you know your face is changing, now you just start deliberately smiling even if you don't want to smile. You know, so initially it looks as if you're pretending, but it's just we have to dealing with, you know, your emotions. These are the things I started doing.
And they're very practical things, which is what I like, because there's a place of prayer, like you said, but a place of then doing practical things.
We can't just pray alone. We have to do practical things. So after you finish praying, then the grace is available. Then also that place of that still small voice. You know, there's a still small voice when you're angry. That voice speaks to you and tells you don't say anything.
Shut up now.
But most times we know how to silence that voice. There's one that is telling us go, do it, just do it. So when you finish doing it, it's that same one that says you do it. I'll start telling you, see what I've done. So when you get the hang of, you know that okay, this is what is going on inside. So just being able to control even what goes on inside of you. So when that voice is saying keep quiet, and you being able to say, okay, you know what, let me hold myself, even though it's difficult, and telling out that voice, I'm not going to follow you because you'll still be the same person that that voice that still, you know. So that was just practical things. And if you look at if you read my book, you see a lot of other things that I, you know, yes, I talk about listening effectively. Just listen. You know, even if you don't understand what is being said, you just okay, let me give you some time to process it. You know, you don't have to give a response per time. Then also, you know, I talked about the place of pride. I talked about pride, and what I said was that most times, and it also is still linked to anger. So at times you don't even know it's important to know where your anger, what causes you to get angry.
The root cause of
the anger. I talked about that, because for different people it will be different things. But a lot of times it's pride. And why do I say pride? Most times when we get angry because we think this person shouldn't talk to me like this. I shouldn't be talked to like this. I shouldn't be treated this way. So it's what you think or feel about yourself. And that's what
that you are showing.
That you show. So when you come to that point whereby people can talk to me anyhow, they can treat me anyhow.
And you're not trying to be right. You're not trying to be the one that is correct.
So anyhow, if you want to talk to me anyhow,
let your ego just calm down.
So once you get to that point, you see that it's easier for people to do things and you don't get upset. So these were the practical things. It was difficult for him because he has seen me. You know, it's like for years you've seen the person doing the same thing. So even when you know, even when I'm being very sincere, like in my conversation, I just want to just talk and not to argue or to make a problem. He already builds a defense, because that's the thing. There's just this defense that comes up immediately.
Because he's also trying to protect himself and his emotions.
So he just puts that defense on, and I'm like, no, I've changed. And you're telling me so it's part of the difficulty. As in, there are places you don't want to get to, because how do you now convince a person that you've changed? So at times I would really, because I used to be very strong-willed, and I'm very independent as well. There's just too many things. So there are things that if I do, you know, it will just make him know, okay, this is different. So at times I could actually even go all the way to like kneel down. You know, I'm just like, you know, because if I should kneel, it means even he himself, this is serious matter. She's not a kneeling kind of person. So there were things I had to now start to do just to make him, and even at times I will cry. As I just wanted, please, sincerely, this conversation now is not the old me that is talking. Please, just believe me. So you see me begging just so that the person will understand me. He had to start learning to trust me again. That's just, it was just a journey of trusting me again. And you know, there's something he always used to tell me that and that's for any spouse that is going through this. You know, he always would tell me that, you know, that what he started doing was that for every time I did these things, it helped his relationship with God. That he just focused his attention on God. So for every time I give it to him, he just goes back. And sincerely, my husband was growing that period. And you know, it's as if he was just having a good time. Because you know, when you're with God, things don't even, and you know, he just knew how to separate the emotions. So whatever I'm doing, he'll just find the corner and put it there. But he was just growing. And like now, people will tell him that he's such a patient person. There's nothing that can happen.
I have been through the fire.
And he tells them that God used me to teach him patience. So most times as spouses, the things we go through, it could just be God also teaching us something, because at the end of the day, there's something you will learn as well. You come out a better person at the end of the day. So it's not just about even the person that has the problem. You too, you will also go through some changes in the process.
So also see it as a reference, a point of change for your life as well. Not just thinking there's something wrong with this person.
Yes, you know, because even if it's self-control, the place of endurance, the fruits of the spirit, you know, you were long suffering. You will now learn these things to love and really love despite what is going on. So whichever way, whether it's a man or the woman in the relationship, if the most important thing is is that you're there for the person. You know, you keep correcting, but you correct in love. You know, there's a problem too. At times people don't even know how to correct.
Yes.
It's not about, some people, their own is just to confront and say, you are wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong. And you're not even telling the person a way out. So for him, he's telling you are wrong, but he's also telling you, this is how you can be better.
Yeah.
This is what you can do.
Never allow anger to become stronger, Tanji's relationships. Learn to forgive and seek peace to survive many storms.